Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the online seminars of the Italian Reproducibility Network. This is the final seminar of this academic year, but we will have a new series of seminars, of course, in the next academic year. And this one has been a very productive year for the Italian Reproducibility Network. We have become an association, and by the way, if you are not yet a member, please consider becoming one. The membership fee is low, and this is really, I think, a way to be part of a great community that supports transparency and reproducibility in our country. And as you know, power is in the numbers, so please enroll in the Italian Reproducibility Network. By the way, we had a great meeting this year actually, a great meeting of the association in Rome in February, where new ideas have come up, new initiatives have started, new connection and research opportunities have emerged. And if you missed it, in February 2024, we will have our next meeting in Bologna, and I hope that I'll see you all in person there. And also this series of seminars, I think, have been great from the very first, which was from Valentina Pasquale, who spoke about the transformative potential of open science. Then we had Nicholas Coles, sorry, from the Psychological Science Accelerator, who spoke about multi-lab projects. Then Rima Maria Rahal on replication studies, Jan Wagenmakers on the best practices and transparency in statistics, Enrico Glarean on data sharing, Irax Puebla on the revision process and preprints, Alex Holcomb on contributorship. And if you missed any, or if you want to see them again, you can find them on our channel on YouTube. But well, let me introduce today's speaker, Ioana Alina Cristea. Ioana is a clinical psychologist and a cognitive behavioral therapist, and has a direct experience with many universities around the world. In particular, she received her PhD in psychology from Babeș-Bolyai University in Romania, and then she conducted research in Italy, in Pisa and Pavia, in the US at Stanford University, in the Netherlands at the Vrije University in Amsterdam, and now she's associate professor at the University of Padua and affiliate researcher of the Meta Research Innovation Center at Stanford University. So between her competence in meta research and her worldview that she has because of having been in so many universities, I think she's the perfect speaker for today's talk. She's also the PI of an European Research Council starting grant, which is entitled, let me see, I want to read it to be sure, Disentangling Psychological Interventions for Mental Disorders, into a Taxonomy of Active Ingredients, Decompose. By the way, I hope that today Ioana will have the time to give us some information about this project, because I'd really love to know a little bit more about it. And the topic of today, in any case, is academic evaluation, and in particular, the critical issue of considering open science practices in academic evaluation. And as many of you already know, the talk will take approximately 45 minutes, and this will be followed by a session for questions. And I think that's it for now. So thank you, Ioana. Welcome here, and the stage is yours.
Okay. Thank you for inviting me. And yes, I think we will have more time for questions than 50 minutes. Anyway, so just if you give me a second to organize Zoom. Okay. Okay, so I always feel a bit weird talking about this topic. First of all, because I never held any position in which I would be able to implement academic incentives. Actually, this year will be my first year as a PhD coordinator as well. So I never how do you say that, had the power, and also because I ended up in a group that made a proposal to redesign academic incentives almost by accident. I was at Stanford, and the other researcher who was supposed to take part of this group, he pulled out, wasn't interested, and in fact, he stopped his postdoc. So then somebody had to help, and it was me. And like this, let's say I became interested in the question of incentives. That was not one of my principal interests at the time. This was taking place 5 years ago. So I looked for some vignettes to have something funny in the beginning, but you know these all so well. So first, there's the question of what should you be researching. So you start with the idea before grad school that whatever all subjects, then you try to match your professor's topics. Then you start to think about the tenure and promotion committees and what are the topics, or well, in Italian fields, the disciplinary domains that are most in want. Then you start to think about grant committees, and I know a lot about that. Having applied twice at the ERC starting grant, I know how important it is to really try to match what committees are looking for. And finally, you're old and you're just going to research whatever, because anyway, you don't have more time. And the same thing is about this famous publish or perish saying that you see here in this vignette. It's been restructured in, it's not just about publishing or perishing, but maybe publishing in high impact journals or perishing, and not even that, maybe publishing frequently enough in high impact journals, and maybe you won't perish. So this is a piece in Nature that actually it will be a nice arch in my presentation. These are two, actually one was the Dean of the Faculty of Medicine, I think, Frank Medema at the same time, and Rinse Benedict was also involved in the leadership at the University of Utrecht. And why do I say this will be an arc of my presentation? Because in the beginning, I will start with their critical comment about how academic evaluation was happening. And in the end, we will dedicate a bit more time to look at what Utrecht University is now actually doing. So as you can see, this is a comment in Nature that cuts no corners, an obsession with metrics. They say our own university is proud about this. We put it on our website, 2,500 scientific publications a year, and a higher than average citation rate. And also they say, when we are looking for who to hire, we actually end up hiring the same people. So in this example here, the committee had discussed for hours, and this is a very good, a top university. So you can imagine they had very good candidates, and in the end, they anyway chose two researchers who had particularly prestigious grants. In the meantime, other types of forms of academic publication, for instance, policy documents, are less valued, and faculty who are involved in this have difficulty explaining why they should also be promoted, even if in the end it's guidelines that inform the most important clinical decisions. So this was a time, actually 2016, this whole movement started a bit earlier, in the early 210, so that decade, but this was a time when a lot of proposals were being made about how we should try to restructure academic evaluation, appraisal of scientists, rewards, what do you want to call it. This is actually a proposal in JAMA, and I included it first because it's not such a, this is from 2014. If you look at it, it's not really such a great departure from what is already being done. So productivity is still on the list, and they still propose looking at high impact publications. So, but in terms of number of citations, also in funded proposals. So the typical indicators of academic success that we all know. There are some hints to things that are more related to open sciences. Open science, for instance, that you would be publishing protocols, that you would have publications that are reproducible, that you would share your data and material and so on. And since this is biomedical research, also a criteria about findings being translational, so that the proportion of outputs that you published that led to some kind of translational milestone. Other proposals, including ours, this is from 2018. So we tried in this piece to sort of bring together a number of proposals that had been made for how the system to assess scientists for hiring, promotion, and tenure should change. And so we came up, there were so many proposals focused on someone that would give a broader vision, others on just small parts. So we came up with some principles. Contributing to societal need is an important goal of scholarship. So PMT, promotion and tenure committees, need to find a way to assess this. Assessment should be evidence-based, and that means that we should invest in finding indicators that can be useful to support best publication practices. And we proposed, I will show it in the next slide, a board of such indicators that we call RIAs, responsible indicators for assessing scientists. Publication of all results completely and transparently, regardless of whether they're positive, negative, or whatever. So emptying all the file drawers. And we suggested that committees should also look as to whether you published all the research that you conducted, and above all, if this research was funded. So it's inconceivable that you are funded for something and then did not give the public, let's say, any results. Culture of open research. So this refers, of course, to sharing all the artifacts, data, code, but also open access publications. Research into how you would best evaluate scientists. So this is a pretty unique thing we propose, in the sense that we said, okay, there are all these proposals, but there is no data to what would work better or not. So we also need to fund research into evidence of the optimal ways to assess scientists, and funding out-of-the-box ideas. So people who receive funding for innovative out-of-the-box idea should also be considered should be valued in these decisions. So what we propose is responsible indicators are actually some of the key components of open science: registration, including registered reports, sharing of results, reproducible reporting, so complete and transparent reporting, usually using reporting guidelines, contributions to peer review. You can't just submit papers, you also have to do your part in evaluating papers. Alternative metrics as a way of gauging a paper's larger impact, so beyond just citations, is it being used by the public, is it being discussed, and so on. And sharing of data sets and software. And at the same time, a year earlier, another paper that actually had the broader scope of imagining the open university from all points of view, so including education and everything, but also a part about scientist assessment. And you can see here there are some suggestions are similar, others less. So stop using the journal impact factor. Article level metrics like citation counts, even if they're imperfect, they're still better than the journal impact factor. Alternative metrics such as Almetric, share data in code, the fact that you share your result in preprints, outreach activity, and a very interesting suggestion of giving researchers empty space, an opportunity in the application to describe in their what they think is important in terms of open scholarship, or what the author referred to as non-traditional research outputs. So things that maybe the promotion and tenure committee would not have considered first, but to give people an opportunity to speak in their own words about what they're doing. And we'll see that this is very similar to where initiatives that are going on now to make promotion and tenure more focused on open science and less on traditional metrics and productivity. In fact, again, these ideas seem like they're very new because they haven't been implemented much. And if you think about the Italian reality, I think there's very little consideration of these aspects in promotion and tenure decisions, but they have been on the agenda for a while. And this actually is a very complete document, you will see in a minute why, produced by the European Commission. So evaluation of research careers, fully acknowledging open science practices. So they start with this research reward circle where you see that there's a research, but then there's an assessment of the research. Assessment gets you some recognition, the recognition gets you some rewards, the rewards increases motivation, and in turn it determines the research you're going to conduct. But what is interesting is that they propose a pretty complete matrix of how an open science career can be assessed. And it, I will not read it all, just going through some categories. So for instance, open access publications, sharing data sets and research results using the FAIR principles, open source software, stakeholder engagement, actively engage society and research user in the process, share preprints, research integrity, be aware of ethical and legal issues about data sharing, peer review, contribute to open peer review, examining open research, public engagement activities, mentoring in terms of open science capabilities, and so on. So why is this interesting? Actually, this is not a fringe proposal. This is not something that it's a pretty standard, we can say, traditional document, right? And this matrix could be very easily implemented by a lot of academic settings. Because if you look at the outputs are very well described, you can establish criteria for it. You can even just include this in a qualitative evaluation, and yet it's not, at least in my experience, I have yet to see promotion or tenure decision that puts an emphasis on open science in academic evaluation. In grant proposal, it is a bit different. So already from 2017, the European Commission had produced a pretty complete document about this. And now we get to maybe a more thought-provoking proposal. So this is from a paper that stats, it's an essay that you see from the title itself is very provocative, how to make more published research true. So the idea is that a lot of what's wrong in the fact that most research is either not true or not reproducible or not useful has to do with the incentive system. And so basically the author imagines a type of currency system. So you see here, this is the current system. And here as currencies, he lists what is currently rewarded. So publications are rewarded, replicated publications, sharing of data is not rewarded at all, contribution to peer review. Again, this is 2014 now. In some places, contribution of peer review is, but it is considered, but let's assume it's like that. So grant funding is very much valued. So then, and he assigns a value to each of these. And what's interesting are the changes that he proposes. So there is change one that is not such a big departure from the system. So you see it will take some of the currency, the reward you get for some things like publications. So you no longer have any value for publication and for administrative positions, because the idea here is that publications are part of your job. So there is no reason that you are rewarded extra. An administrative position anyway gives you a lot of power in itself. So then it shouldn't be valued anymore. So you shouldn't get points, let's say, in a promotion or tenure decision, also because you have administrative positions or networking or that you're involved in lobbying. So for instance, in Romania, when I worked before, if you had positions like being dean, or if you had any type of roles at this level, you would really be awarded points in, let's say, in competition for full professor or something like that. So in this change, what he proposes is that you no longer give so much weight also in other decisions to positions that already have a lot of value. What is interesting though is change 2, and in change 2 you also start to lose for some. So for instance, if you have grant funding, you lose points. Why do you lose points? Because with grant funding, you have been awarded resources. So then you already gained a lot by having those resources. So then it's absolutely conceivable, acceptable, even desirable that you are expected to produce more because you receive more resources. And in fact, if you look here for grant funding, you lose 5 points, but for administrative positions, you lose up to 200 points, because the idea is that if you have this, you have already so much power to influence important decisions that we should compensate it in a way. You're already ahead in any kind of promotion or tenure competition. So of course, this is a very, it's an intellectual exercise, it's a provocative proposal that would probably never be implemented by any universities. And I'm sure many of you off the top of your head can immediately think about disadvantages and problems that could arise. It's just a useful paradigm. And remember here, the scope here was to try to eliminate the flaws in published research. So to try to make it truer, as he says, more true, by eliminating these structural problems. And the idea is that the one of the causes of structural problems, like not reporting all your data, not sharing, and so on, is the incentive structures. You're not rewarded for this, and sometimes you're even punished. Another document, this is from 2019, and it's a more complex document of the European Commission. And already here, the document is articulated starting from the idea that we don't even know what open science is. So before we decide of how we should implement open science, value open sciences in academic evaluation, we need to understand that it includes more than one thing. So there's one approach that's focused on accessible and transparent knowledge that's shared and collaboration across networks. But there's another approach that's focused on openness as social practice, so engagement of researchers with open science. And in fact, there's this quote I included here that I think is very telling. And the authors say, in other words, open science is not about simply making all knowledge unconditionally available to all. So not just having everything out there, data, code, publications, open access, and so on. It also requires careful consideration of the diversity of scientific practices, whether aimed at scientific progress as a goal in itself, or at solving societal challenges, or a combination of both. So the idea of this report is that we will fail if we keep trying to look for universal or generic indicators of open science, because these indicators depend very much on the context of assessment and also on the conditions of their use. So instead of trying to find indicators that we can put in lieu of productivity indicators and conduct academic evaluations like this, the authors suggest a structure called indicator frameworks. So the idea here would be that you have sets of indicators that are coherent for similar research purposes and under the same evaluative purpose. And to create the toolbox of these indicators, they say there should be a concerted effort by all stakeholders. So not just within a discipline or within more disciplines, so not just from the scientific community, but also from the data and metrics community. Because in fact, a lot of indicators of open science or productivity or whatever you will come from the metrics community. And they propose 4 toolboxes, and you will see that they are on different levels. So the first one is infrastructure, referring to the scientific system, and so not to individual researchers and not even to institutions, but to the system at the national, international, or disciplinary level. So here you would value the creation, the growth of open knowledge infrastructures, the nature of their contributions, whether they are used, whether they are accessed, the uptake from the research community. The second one would be capability indicators in research communities. So here you would be at the community level, whether it's a discipline or whether it's a field or whether it's a university or an area or so on. And you will be looking whether they have the resources to be able to produce open knowledge or engage with open knowledge. So a simple example is their support personnel to show you how to use the existing tools or infrastructures. The third one is pioneering open knowledge practices. So here they envision this being done with case studies. For instance, the UK Research Excellence Framework already has a database of case studies of success stories of places that implemented a different type of academic evaluation based, let's say, on to use their terms, open knowledge, open knowledge, and what are the practices they used. And in fact, in the remaining of the presentation, I will show a bit this about Utrecht University. And finally, the last one, individual level indicators, which could refer to any of the ones I presented before, our own RIAS, the Open Science Career Evaluation Matrix that, as I said, is pretty well detailed, well defined. One could imagine that for a given discipline or a given context, the promotion and tenure committee could select a part of those indicators, assign values, say, okay, in this category, we value this, and include it as a part of the evaluation of candidates. Okay, so after having quickly run through this proposal, we return to a practical case, because, I mean, I'm sure that by now you have a bit, if you didn't already, the idea that there are a lot of proposals, a lot of good ideas. Some seem more feasible than others, more ready for implementation than others less. How exactly can we do this in practice? How exactly would it just be another thing to tick? So like now the promotion and tenure committee, for instance, in Italy measures, I don't know, the number of academic publications, citations, whether they're relevant for the field. And then you would add another little box where you would say open science practices, you have to check at least 2. Would it be like this? Or would it be a restructuring, a revamping, a rebuilding from the ground up of the entire academic evaluation system? And actually, this is what Utrecht is doing. So this is from the same article I showed you before, and this was the beginning of their process. So they say that now all Utrecht candidates, this was in 2016, must provide a short essay about who they are and what their plans are as faculty members. They must discuss achievements in terms of 5 domains, and only one of these domains is scientific publication and grants. They must describe managerial responsibilities, academic duties, which include peer review and committee participation, explain how much they devote to students, courses they develop, other responsibilities, clinical work if it's the case, and also entrepreneurship and community outreach. And so what exactly, how does this exactly take place? This is a more recent articles that this is a comment in Nature that made a lot of waves, and which Dutch University abandons the impact factor. And you have here a quote that I think is very relevant from one of the researchers that one of the scientists that is in charge of making this process happen. He said that each department will have to develop its own system and strategies to identify researchers and academics who are making the most meaningful contributions to their fields. And how exactly do they do this? So this is their the whole process is called recognition and reward, and this is from their vision document, and then I will show you a few examples. So you see here that these are, let's say, some important principles, and they all have to do with impact and with team, leadership, education. But the 5 principles on which the recognition and reward vision is based are the following. So first of all, collaboration, collective as a point of departure. But this also means that there must be a match between what's available in terms of talent and competencies and what the group's research and education demands are. That means that just the fact that you are there and you have a talent or a competence, and it's undoubtful that you have it, so you are good at your research or at whatever you teach, if there's no match between what the program needs, then this will be weighed negatively, obviously, in your promotion and tenure. So from the beginning, the idea that everybody who's there should in a way manage to be promoted regardless of what happens is off the table. Invest in leadership. So leadership is no longer something that you do at the end of your career. Leadership is assessed. The idea is that leadership can start early. You can start being a leader from when you're a PhD student. And so at all levels, hands-on, exactly what are the practices that you are promoted and what are the values that you are serving. So again, this is something that is weighed is valued and assessed in academic evaluation. Stimulate diversification in profiles and dynamic careers. This is actually antagonistic to what most of our universities are doing now, where the idea is that you have to be a specialist in everything. You have to be a great researcher, absolutely great teacher, do your share of administrative duties, be involved in community outreach or whatever you want to call it, so getting your research. No, do everything at top level. If you check all this, then you have a lot of chances to be promoted. So here it's the opposite. They actually say research and teaching are, you cannot do without them. So everyone has to do them, but you can choose your path. You can say, I'm better at doing this. I will invest most of my resources and energy in becoming more proficient at this. You don't have to be, and leadership is one of the domains in which you can become proficient. So it's also weighed here too. Recognize and reward openness, so sharing using FAIR principles. Again, sharing using FAIR principles is important to mention because not every sharing is sharing. If you share your data in an SPSS file that nobody else can open without SPSS, that's not data sharing. You should not be rewarded for that in any way. You have just put an unusable file there and have not invested even the time in converting it in something else. So not every sharing is good sharing. And finally, reward quality over quantity. So the evaluation now takes place according to a narrative that you build with assessment criteria and quality indicators that are based both on your perception, so self-determined, what you think is important. And again, remember, selecting your own career path, investing in those fields, those domains, let's say, of academic activity where you feel you can contribute most, but also on the strategy and aims of the team. So what is needed in the team, the group, the department, the institution that you are going to be working in. And finally, some of their stories here. So this is a career and promotion policy at the Faculty of Geosciences. So this is a university-wide document, the recognition and rewards vision. And then, as I said, he also said in this piece in Nature, each department has to find their own way of implementing this, because obviously, remember what we said before with the sets of indicators. Obviously, different contexts will have different needs and different things that will matter. Think about the value of clinical research. There are disciplines where you cannot do clinical research, or it's not something that has such a big value as other types of research, for example. So for instance, in this approach, initiated by the head of HR, a new career and promotion at the Faculty of Geosciences. So what employees had to do is write their development in 13 subdomains over the last 5 years. So with this approach, the faculty wants to promote focus on societal impact, and also look at how individual performance contributes to team spirit. So you basically reflect on your development following these guidelines and trying to adhere to these principles. Closer to psychology and the Department of Education, a new promotion policy, so promotion for people who are already there. So new positions were created, associate professors were created, aimed at more differentiation and the shift of focus within the department. So top-down decision was taken that we need different kinds of expertise. So this is completely antagonistic to the idea that we have people who are doing this and that. These people are good at what they're doing, so we have to find a way to promote them. Here we are saying we need this kind of focus. We need specialists in this kind of field that's not represented in this kind of, with this kind of expertise. So we are going to see who among ours have this, and if we don't find it, and this is exactly what happened here for two of the positions, they looked outside. So again, it's an opposite approach from what is happening now in many faculties. And the idea would also be here to look in to have a vision of what kind of expertise would you need on the long term. So what kind of specialists in research, education, leadership, and so on, is your department going to need over the long term? My favorite thing about this policy is their FAQ section. As you see, it's called Tough Questions, Honest Answers. And I will show two examples so that you see that they are really tough questions and honest answers. So this is a big change, it's a structural change. So obviously there are a lot of questions that can arise. And you can see here some examples of really tough questions. Do you mean we will have more permanent position? Is it only for academic staff? The fact that you are going to implement this system could also open the door to demotion. So then you are the opposite of promotion, you are taken down from your position. Is it an answer on the high work outload? Will the transition have financial incentives? Is it a threat to fundamental science? Will there be a moratorium on quantitative indicators? So you can look at their website if you want. I just included two examples. So this is tough question one, and you see the honest answer is very honest. Will we have more permanent positions? No, we won't. It's not that the change in system, we say there's room for everybody's talent, but not necessarily everybody's talent requires a permanent position in the university. So requirements will be transparent and open, and you will know that competition is based, it will be based on more than what you yourself are doing. It will also be based on the needs and the priorities of the department, for instance. But as you can see, what will probably happen is what happens now. Just like today, in the future, there will be many who work at the university and then move to another sectors. Those who pursue an academic career will no longer face an up or out system, not a job, but a career for life. Okay, so I like the fact that they are being honest. They're not saying we are going to solve other problems as well with this system. They're not saying we're going to have more room. They're not saying we're going to have more place for everyone to remain in the university. And I mean, this is cynical, but at least it's honest. Is there a moratorium on the use of metrics? Yes, metrics will no longer be used, at least not on their own. For sure, the H indicators and the journal impact factor are banned, so this will not be used at all. But they say there might still, scientific publications do not lose value. They can still be used to illustrate the narrative that each researcher is asked to develop. So as a complement, as an enrichment, as a proof of what you've done. And quantitative indicators, if meaningful, can still be included. But they give here an example. For example, 2 interviews per year in national newspapers are not an indicator of impact. And it isn't even intelligent to aim for some other number. And if you think, those of you who've been involved in committees deciding, for instance, which candidate to select, this is in fact exactly what we're doing in committee. Either we give a point by number, or we say, okay, the threshold is at least one interview, or at least one engagement activity, or at least 5 publications. So we are doing the exact opposite of what they are proposing now. Okay, so this was my presentation. Now I still have 2 minutes, so I will actually show you, I had doubts whether to do this. I will actually show you a video. It's in Dutch, but it's translated in English, of how this system is supposed to work in practice. So if you just give me a second. It's just 4 minutes and we don't have to leave it all. Okay, stop share. And now I will share this video. If I find it. No, just a second. Sorry. I have a very messy screen. Okay. Okay. Can you see it? I hope so.
Op je plek zijn op je werk. Het gevoel hebben dat je iets bijdraagt. Dat je inspanningen worden gezien. We weten allemaal hoe belangrijk dat is. Erkennen en waarderen gaat over hoe we op de universiteit met elkaar werken. Wat staat er op de agenda van ons team? Waar hebben we het over? Wat gaan we doen? En heb ik invloed op wat daar staat?
Als hoogleraar houd ik me bezig met de vraag hoe organisaties het beste uit werknemers kunnen halen. Hoe je de ambities van het individu, team en organisatie op elkaar afstemt. Het implementeren van erkennen en waarderen gaat niet over een nacht ijs. Ik kom daarbij collega's tegen die zeggen, wat betekent erkennen en waarderen nou precies? Ze zoeken echt nog naar die invulling. Tegelijkertijd komen we ook veel collega's tegen die al precies invoelen waar erkennen en waarderen om draait. Ze doen het al uit zichzelf, omdat ze voelen dat je met deze manier van werken sneller en beter je doel bereikt.
Hoe die collega's te werk gaan, willen we je met deze serie graag laten zien.
Digital Humanities is eigenlijk de geesteswetenschappen, maar dan met computers. Bij het lab werken we aan software voor wetenschappelijk onderzoek. Meestal betekent dat er een onderzoeker komt aan met een onderzoeksproject waar ze iets voor nodig hebben dat er nog niet is. En dan maken wij dat.
Een van de projecten die we op dit moment doen is onderzoek over parlementaire data samen met Finse onderzoekers. En zij zijn eigenlijk geïnteresseerd van welke termen komen samen voor met democratie.
Alles op het internet kun je heel makkelijk vinden. Maar dit soort archieven zijn vaak moeilijk te doorzoeken. Ja, je moet best wel veel spitten door vaak materiaal dat niet relevant is. Dus dat proberen we heel erg te versnellen om iemand zo snel mogelijk te helpen aan. Dit zijn de meest interessante speeches bijvoorbeeld om te bekijken. Wat ik zo mooi vind van de mensen die bij het Digital Humanities Lab werken en bij het Center for Digital Humanities, is dat zij die brug kunnen maken. Dus in staat zijn om mee te denken met de onderzoeksvraag. Te snappen wat er nodig is om een bepaald resultaat te bereiken. En dus ook snappen wat zij dan moeten programmeren, wat zij dan moeten ontwikkelen.
Nou, ik denk dat dit niet specifiek over Digital Humanities gaat, maar algemener over die onderscheiding tussen ondersteunend personeel en wetenschappelijk personeel. Er zijn gewoon systemen in de universiteit ingeregeld op manieren die misschien niet helemaal passen bij de realiteit van nu. Ja, ik ben natuurlijk wel ondersteunend personeel, omdat ik andere mensen help met hun onderzoek. Maar tegelijk ben ik betrokken bij het bedenken van methodes, bij het maken van visualisaties en bij het interpreteren van data. Dus dat is wel een wetenschappelijke bijdrage. Dus eigenlijk ben ik allebei.
Een van de dingen die ik fijn vind aan de manier waarop wij ons werk doen, is eigenlijk juist dat wij niet zoveel bezig zijn met wat voor publicaties heb ik onder mijn naam staan. Ik draag bij in het team en het team heeft dit gedaan.
Wat fijn is om te merken dat nu echt ook veel mensen daarmee bezig zijn. Dus er wordt nu gewerkt aan bijvoorbeeld systemen om software ook te kunnen laten zien op de profielpagina. Dus ja, er is al wel verandering en dat is wel heel fijn om inderdaad alles ook te kunnen weergeven en te kunnen documenteren wat wij doen.
Het mooie van erkennen en waarderen vind ik dat de rol die een ontwikkelaar heeft in het samen met die onderzoeker een bepaald resultaat bereiken, dat die ook echt gewaardeerd wordt. Dat dat echt ook een plek heeft. Het zijn mensen die een beetje tussen wetenschapper en OBP'er invallen. En dat is oké. Dat is die rol, die is er ook.
Okay, thank you for your time. Oh, sorry.
Okay, well, thank you.
Stel je nou voor dat je...
Sorry.
Thank you, Ioana. That it was very well. I don't know if there are already questions. Otherwise, I'll begin with one question. Can I?
I don't see any yet. So
Okay, because
go
I don't
ahead.
want to take the place of anybody else. But I have various questions, but I'm just trying with asking you two in particular, because what you have shown us that there is a lot that is going on, a lot of proposals that are going on, and some changes are being implemented. We have just seen, yeah, what's happening in Utrecht. But well, the first question is, what do you think is the current stage in Europe in general? Do you think that there are we are going on in two different speeds, like Northern Europe going faster than in the south of Europe, like Italy, or is just Utrecht and some universities that are really like more more farther away than the rest? And this is the first, if there is a problem with the South or not. And then thinking especially about thinking of young people at the very beginning of their career. Is there anything that a young researcher can do at the individual level to help speeding this process? Or, well, of course, perhaps we can join our groups and organizations, because the power, as I mentioned at the beginning, is in numbers. But for the individual, do we just have to wait at the individual level, or do you have some suggestions to help this process, this change?
So for the first one, I'm not really sure. I think, so for instance, for sure, open science involvement is starting to be valued also in other contexts of promotion and tenure. So for instance, in some UK university that I know of, not sure exactly how the process is in Italy. I guess it depends a lot on the place, on the competition. I think here things will change, because now, for instance, grant evaluations have started to give explicit weight to open science. And this I know for sure, because I was also a reviewer, and we would actually cut points if the open science component, and it's no longer enough to say, well, we'll follow the practice of open science. So for instance, in a recent grant evaluation that I had to do, they had to explain exactly how each step of the FAIR process will be met. So data will be made available according to FAIR, okay, this for F, this for A, and so on. So it will start to change, because the same thing happened to open access publications. The more they were required internationally and European, at the level of the European Commission, the more they started to be weighted in promotion and tenure decisions. So yes, the difference with Utrecht is that here it's more than just considering them and assigning points. This is what I tried to illustrate. That's also why I included the video. It's a different vision. So, and we might not like everything from this vision. So for one idea, it's that we don't need, for instance, 10 mechanics that are doing the same kind of mechanics. So we need diversification, and not a lot of people might not like this, because in a way it's unfair. I say now that we need diversification, but nobody told me in the beginning of my career, right? And so now we are 10 scientists doing the same. The other thing is that no single indicator matters enough. It starts to be about the story of your career, the narrative that you can build. Where will you be in 5 years, and what skills? Of course, this is not just an exercise of imagination. It's not like saying 5 years. No, you have to offer evidence for this, or illustrate this in a way. Say, okay, I will use these skills, and I see myself developing this further and this further. So you weave information in. Of course, it's not a dream exercise, but it's different, because you are evaluated on the basis of this. So for the specific case of Italy here, I think here there is this obsession with having the objectivity of the selection process, which of course is not an objectivity at all. It's not really objective. It can't be, but you need to give the impression that it's objective. So it would be inconceivable that you interview candidates, you read their portfolios, then the committee talks and they make a decision. It will probably even be at this moment illegal in Italy to do this, because you need to give the exact report in which there was a difference of 0.25 points on whether or not the publication matched the field. And so it's also kind of a cultural change, because in a way such a system gives a lot of credence to the fact that people who are in the committees are doing their best to select the best candidate. And in a lot of places, this is not really a good assumption. It's not paranoid to assume that people who are in the commission are doing their best to select their favorite candidate. So there's a tension between these two. But what I want to emphasize is that there are also gray areas. So places that are starting to give weight to open science practices, the indicators that I presented and several others. And it can also be done in a more traditional way, so to speak, even if in the end, it will probably not be enough and you'll have to get to this qualitative, holistic evaluation of what the researcher is and what they plan to do. About the second thing, yes. So for instance, for Utrecht, one of the interesting things they say in this Nature article is that they say they think it worked for them. They started this actually earlier than 2016, because they didn't wait. They didn't wait for the funders to also change. They didn't wait for the journal. They just said, we're going to be doing it on our own. Even if in the beginning, people said, okay, but Utrecht, your researchers are going to be misaligned with, they're not going to get grants anymore because you don't care about productivity anymore, and you're not going to get funded anymore because and students are out because you don't have the highly cited professors, and so on. And they went on their own way. Were they lucky? Were they just mindful of the times? It's true that the emphasis started to shift for funders as well, and it's also true that the fact that they choose researchers differently didn't necessarily mean they chose researchers that were less productive or that were, so there wasn't any change in, let's say, quality traditionally evaluated. But I guess one of the things is this: you should be doing everything that is in your power right now, because if you wait for the system to change and in the meantime sharpening your pencils and you're waiting there and you're ready, when it changes, you know what to do. It might not happen very soon. And yeah, so this is all that I feel comfortable in advising at this point.
Thank you. I don't know, maybe I can ask another question, because I was interested in your PLOS paper. You mentioned one point which I think is important, that we basically should publish all of our research, make at least available to people all of our research, not only the ones with the perfect results. But I was wondering, how can we check that the researcher does this? Because of course, if I have pre-registered the studies, I can see whether a researcher has published all or has made available all the data of all what he or she has pre-registered. But in the other cases, I was wondering, how you can really implement that.
No, you can't. This is a catch-22. So without registering what you plan to do, I mean, you could, in theory, you could, if you had access, for example, to all the ethical approval protocols, and then you would see the studies that were planned. And actually some studies like this were done for medical schools, and they looked at differences between the protocol registered for the ethical board and then what you published after from the data. But yeah, it's clear that this open practice require one another. So for instance, here, the example that would have made sense anyway is that of clinical trials, because very few people don't register their clinical trials anymore. It's very, very hard to publish clinical trials. So then if you're evaluating a researcher and you also look at what they registered on clinical trial registries, and you see that some projects appear to not have been published, this is something you can take into consideration. But outside of this, of course, it's very, very difficult. You can also assess it by proxy. If you give value to published preprints, that means it's somebody who's doing an effort in publishing everything that they produce. So, but one thing I haven't mentioned, and we always discuss a lot in regards to all these changes, is that what's known as unintended consequences. So things that you didn't want to change and that are changing. So for example, with any system, what was said about metrics, you replace productivity metrics with alt metrics or with metrics based on something else, and people will try to exploit those. So in the same way that now people are trying to get accrue citations, or they will try to, and so this is why, for instance, we proposed to try to invest in gathering evidence about which practices would be the best. Because if you do that, like in a experimental study, so for instance, in a department, you do the new policy for promotion and tenure, in another, you do the old one and you randomize, then you might also come across, okay, the benefits, but also some of the unanticipated negative effects, so to speak. You might discover that you are only attracting a certain type of candidate, and others are not coming because they don't feel they can participate. And so this is why we emphasize that many of these ideas seem like good ideas, but before you decide that they are good policies, you need to gather more impact research, so to speak.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely agree with that.
I see one. Okay, no.
Okay, I see a hand.
I'm not sure if, yes, I see a raised hand by Davide. And I'm sorry because I've just seen it now and I don't know how long it's been there.
Don't worry, Fede, it's just come up.
Okay.
Don't worry. I was leaving room for others, but since there are no other questions, I can go ahead. Thanks a lot, Ioana. Wonderful talk. I agree with everything you said, and especially on this obsession for numbers that just sort of hides a false sense of objectivity. So that I think is a big change that we need to face. It's not only cultural, unfortunately. I think that it needs to be a legal one, which makes me very pessimistic that this is going to happen in the short term, but it's good that we're heading in the same direction. So my question was about a little bit of a rebound effect, right? Because when we talk about these things, it seems a little bit like, you know, like the Utrecht move, right? So the impact factor doesn't matter entirely, as if it was something that just doesn't exist or it's completely false or misleading.
Yeah.
While I don't know, my opinion is that it is definitely a bad index for doing something, but it remains a good index for evaluating other stuff, right? For example, everything else being equal, obviously a paper that goes into current biology or PNAS or Nature has a broader relevance than a paper that goes into Journal of Memory and Language or Journal of Psycholinguistics, just to mention very solid journal, but that remain limited to my own field, right? So this is one factor, and I think it doesn't make much sense to say this should be off the table. I think it should be on the table just as well as many other things that right now aren't. So I don't know what's your opinion about that, but to me, like a better balanced approach also to actually give this move even a better chance to succeed is to recognize that what's in place right now is not all wrong, right? It's not like we have to destroy everything and start from scratch. It's just a matter of, you know, teasing apart something that makes sense and something that doesn't make sense. Even if the thing that doesn't make sense now is definitely preponderant, right? So on that I agree. But I think that if we are perceived as, you know, too much of revolutionaries, let me say that, right? Like getting rid of everything, the only things that matter is qualitative assessment, we risk to be a little bit off the mark, and also jeopardize a little bit the possibility of success of the revolution that is happening at the moment.
So about the journal impact factor, because this is actually a very complicated discussion. So first of all, signatories of DORA should not use the journal impact factor. That's why they signed DORA. DORA is the San Francisco Declaration. And the idea there is that we will no longer use impact factor for individual assessment. This means I will no longer count your papers in Nature, Science, and PNAS, and so on. why is this complicated? Because so to rank journals, the journal impact factor is not actually such a bad indicator. It's to rank articles, and this is due to a property that's been demonstrated, in fact, from the beginning by Garfield himself, of the journal impact factor, which is in the way it's calculated. This is called the journal impact factor's long tail. And basically what it means is that the impact factor is determined by the articles that get most citations. So if the impact factor in Nature is 50, I need to accept articles that I know over two years will get at least 50 citations. All the others don't matter. This, of course, has a lot of problems because it means that journals can game this very well. There's actually a famous journal in my field that I think tracks this at the limit. So they look at the articles that are close to their impact factor and they try to accrue citations. So the system can be really gamed from this point of view. Another reason why in that period people were very much against the journal impact factor is because it had become, at least in top universities, the #1 currency. I remember when I was at Stanford, we were told that in some departments, more scientific departments, people would act by their number of Nature and Science publications. So of course, Stanford gets the best candidates, but you would hear this candidate X, he just published in Science. So this kind of thing. I agree with you that the risk of replacing, for instance, citation counts with altmetrics, Twitter, or whatever, so to me, it doesn't solve the problem at all, and not even complementing them solves the problem. But with the journal impact factor in itself, it's a bit of I think there's not much room here left to say that it still should be used for individual evaluations. For deciding where to publish, okay, but again, you're doing it in the idea that then, because if people decided to publish in Nature because they think this is a super important paper, and if it's in Nature, then it will change people's life, it would be one thing. But people publish in Nature because then it's your name in Nature, and then others see it too, and then the committee sees it too, and then, so I really don't think here much can be saved. I agree that some quantitative metrics, and in fact, this is also what's been suggested in this other report that wants to involve the data community. Some indicators of productivity can be improved. There's, for instance, instead of citation counts, there's this indicator that's called the relative citation ratio that solves some of these problems. Unfortunately, not the journal impact factor. 4 as the marker of individual assessment. That's yeah. But again, to me, the fundamental problem here is who does this qualitative evaluation, because we have to have full confidence that the people doing it are doing it with this kind of, let's call them, values in mind, and they're not doing it with nepotistic values in mind. And this is easier in a country like the Netherlands, where again, it's a small country, all universities almost are top universities. There's a lot of leeway to go outside. So you do an academic career for a while, then you go into clinical, then you go into industry. There's not this pressure that, you know, from an academic career, you start to hope for a job at the post office. There's a lot in between for you. And I don't know how it can be implemented in bigger settings or where there are also other pressures.
Well, I'm seeing. Now, are there any other questions?
I'm still monitoring, but I don't see any other questions. I don't exactly have a question, but one thing I'm still processing all the, especially the Utrecht example, which was cool and really out of the word from what I'm used to at the same time. So it's going to take me a while to process. But I think also one thing that is that I feel that I saw there reflected there, and I think is very important is sort of transparency, because as a postdoc now, one of the biggest questions and one of the most difficult things to do is try to keep a balance between what I think would be good and what I aspire to do with regards to open science and approach to science and how I conduct my research, and what actually would allow me to keep conducting my research. So for example, choosing where to publish. If I had the chance to publish in Nature in an ideal sample, would I do it? Because it would give me points in the current evaluation system. Or would I choose some other, maybe less prestigious journal because somehow it fits my paper better, my work better, my plan better, but that would, at the time being, hinder my chances at, I don't know, being selected for another position in 2 years. So I think that one thing that is really important is having a picture as clear as possible of what actually matters now, and even where the discourse is going, because then people can make choices and can make plans with a little bit more confidence. And if I choose to disregard nature in favor of something else, then it's an informed choice and not just a random guess of, you know, let's hope this works in the end. I know it cannot, there's always a measure of not knowing how things are going to work out. But I think that when you show the page of the question and of the frequently asked questions on the Utrecht website, that sort of thing, that it may not be, okay, I may not have liked some of the answers, but at least they gave me the answers, or to the best of their abilities, you know. And I understand that those answers might change in the future, or that, again, that maybe I don't like them, but it's something I can use to make my own decisions. So I think that transparency in the intentions of where we want to go and what the obstacles are and how long this might or might not take, it's really important to have.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I agree. And definitely, if you have a finding for Nature, send it to Nature. The problem is you might be very disappointed by how Nature treats it, not in just terms of not being interested, because it's simple. Nature receives a lot of submission by ours. It's when they are interested how they treat it. And I think even early in the career, once you start to see these patterns, the ethics of the journal where you are publishing starts to matter a bit, even if you have to pass a big name, because there are journals who are rewriting your paper, but they are rewriting it not in terms of helping you with the style because they like it written in their style. They are actually making you take things out, put things in. I've never published a research paper in Nature, but I published a letter which they destroyed, basically. It's unrecognizable. Do we have it in Nature? Yes. Does it make the message? Who knows? It's about something else. They rewrote every word. So at some point, it becomes, and even more with experimental data. If you make me you say, okay, if you revise this, I might be interested. And you make me take out the most important things, rewrite the conclusions, rethink the interpretation, put some other things in that are not really related because is it really worth it? So, and I don't think it's any longer the case that these are decisions you just make at the level of assistant professor up. These are also decisions you make at smaller levels. And in fact, if you saw the example of Utrecht, leadership is also this, saying, thank you, but this is my red line. If you go over this and you modify my research further, then I will. One anecdotal example I could have, one of my colleagues for a very, very big finding that was published in Nature, and they tried to reproduce it and they failed. And then Nature initially rejected their, of course, letter, but then Nature was interested. But they really changed it so much that in the end, it wasn't even clear that it was a failed attempt to reproduce a very, in this case, big finding. And it was the group themselves, my friend, who was just a PhD student, but also his coordinator, who said, okay, thank you, we stop here. We take our article somewhere else. It was published somewhere else. And I don't think it made any difference in terms of the importance of getting the results out. So it's also a question of what does it matter for you, that you have your results and your interpretation there, or that you have something loosely related in a big journal? Because sometimes this is really the choice you are making. It's actually more honest to say, no, thank you, Nature receives a lot of submission, thank you so much. Because at least then you don't waste any more time. Also, I think there are papers that make a big impact. They were not published in the top 3 or in the top 5 and so on. So again, this is also something to weigh. If you have a really important paper, it's probably not going to make such a difference whether it's in PNIS or whatever, memory and learning, if it's really a big thing that will influence the field a lot. So I agree, but I think you should set some priorities already at the more, let's say, precarious level of being in the academia, because otherwise you might arrive at the level of assistant professor, discover that the world around has changed, and now people care about how much you shared your data, or did you register your protocol? And you say, wait, I've been playing by the rules of the game at the time. Now you changed them. What happened? So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I totally agree with your vision about that. But I'm seeing that it's already 4:15, so maybe it's time to to wrap it up, basically. So I would ask, please, if Gabriele, thank you, Gabriele. Just some very short, first of all, thank you, Ioana. It was really a great talk, very informative. You also gave us some important things to think about. Especially, I loved this last part of the discussion, the fact that the integrity of the researcher is very important in the decisions that we make for our own research. But anyway, I need to close it now, and some general information. First of all, to those who have requested the certificate of attendance, you will receive it by email in the next 7 days, and we will, as usual, we will upload the video of this talk of Ioana on YouTube, and the ITRN members will be informed about when we upload it. And we thank you all for being here today. Thank you especially to Ioana, but also to the other people being here. And we'll see each other next year for the seminars, well, next academic year for the seminars. And thank you, and have a nice day to everybody. Ciao.
Thank you.